Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video looking at beliefs in society, focusing on the growth of new religious movements. As we've seen in previous videos, new religious movements include cults, sects, and denominations of established religious organisations. They've increased in recent years but started to form on the back of the Protestant Reformation, with different denominations of established religious organisations forming throughout the period of modernity. There has also been an expansion of new religious movements in the latter half of the 20th century, with many sects and cults forming in response to wide-ranging social changes in society. In this video, we're going to look at some of the theoretical explanations for the growth of these new religious movements. There are four explanations that we will examine, each linked into social changes that have occurred and resulted in the formation of new religious movements, or NRMs. Firstly, marginalisation, the formation of NRMs by those on the edges of society. Secondly, the link between deprivation and the membership of NRMs. Thirdly, how wide-ranging social changes have led people to question established religions and form new religious movements. And finally, the increase in supply of new religious movements, and how this has increased membership of them. Ideas of marginalisation were first discussed by Weber in relation to the Protestant Reformation. He argued that the existing religious institutions had pushed individuals to the margins of society, and as a result they looked for other explanations for their position in society. According to Weber, people sought out explanations for their disadvantaged position, what Weber called a theodicy of disprivilege. This explanation can not only be examined through movements in the Protestant Reformation, but the formation of denominations of Christian churches that address the inequalities faced by Black Americans and how Baptist churches came to influence the civil rights movement in the USA. Wallace explained the increase of NRMs by looking at marginalisation also, higher levels of young people involved with new religious movements. Wallace argued that the changing norms, values and attitudes of young people, particularly in the 1960s and 70s, clashed with the established ideas of mainstream society. As an example, anti-war protests and anti-capitalist ideologies in the USA demonstrated a divergence in the ideas of young and middle-aged America, and the youth sought out others that would validate their opinions, often finding comfort in new religious movements. These countercultural movements rejected dogmatic doctrines of traditional Christianity and offered otherworldly experience through alternative attitudes to drugs, sexuality and freedom, which appealed to young, marginalised Americans. Wallace further argued that deprivation, both economic and spiritual, had led to individuals seeking out enrichment from new religious movements. Frustrated by the materialism presented by capitalist society, people sought out personal fulfillment instead, finding communities of like-minded souls. Wallace saw this as a reaction to being unable to obtain the material gains within capitalist society, and thus the growth of NRMs was a symptom of deprivation in society. This deprivation argument is furthered by both Maguire and Stark and Bainbridge. Maguire argued that deprivation created the conditions for individuals to turn away from established religion and seek other explanations for their disadvantaged position, often offered by NRMs. Stark and Bainbridge, on the other hand, suggest that schisms develop over status within the hierarchy of organised religion, with those of lower status leaving to form their own religious movements that are built upon their interpretations of religion. The promise of moving up the hierarchy allows others to follow suit, and this causes the expansion of the schism movement. Wilson, examining both the UK and USA, argued that NRMs form as a result of changing norms and values in society. As these norms and values change, established religions often fail to move as rapidly as individuals, and therefore religion fails to satisfy an individual's beliefs. As a result, people will move to new religious movements that do reflect their changing views and position in society and look for fulfillment from that new religious movement. This argument is supported by Bruce, who argued that the failings of traditional religion to adapt to modern society for example views on same-sex marriage, led people to move to more progressive forms of religion, usually offered by new religious movements. When examining social change, Wallace argued that changing norms and values would inevitably lead to individuals seeking out new forms of belief, but instead argued that this was a result of increased levels of education and progressive ideologies. The expansion of youth as people lived longer, spent more time in education, and had more time to challenge traditional ideas was central to this. Furthermore, technological advancement and changing political ideologies would bring new ideas about the world to individuals, and their needs would change based upon this, leading them away from the established religion to new religious movements. In line with their market view of religion, Stark and Bainbridge viewed religion through economic theory, examining the supply and demand of NRMs. They argued that as new religious movements formed, it would stimulate demand for alternatives to traditional religion, and in turn this would lead to more new religious movements to form. Giving individuals more choice over how they practice their beliefs will lead to an increase in the range of belief systems available, and so further push the growth of NRMs. In evaluating these arguments, it's worth examining the correlations between the growth of new religious movements in the latter part of the 21st century and the seismic social changes that occurred in the post-World War II years in society. It can be argued that this expansion was part of a trend that has since declined, but with the broader range of New Age movements in the period of globalisation, it can be argued social change leads to changes in beliefs. To counter these arguments, economic deprivation often leads individuals back to traditional religious practices, something that has been argued by Norris and Inglehart's existential security theory. Finally, the growth of religious fundamentalism in the period of globalisation can be seen as a reaffirmation of traditional religious practice, as individuals face up to the insecurity of changing norms and values. Albeit, fundamentalist practices can be seen to be a simplified and more extreme form of traditional religions. That concludes this Tutor to You sociology topic video looking at beliefs in society, focusing on the growth of new religious movements. Thanks for watching.